Earlier this month, Bollywood witnessed a conflict, brief but unprecedented, between two industry biggies, Maddock Films and PVR Inox. And it's a conflict that possibly foreshadows a change in the way films will be sold in the country. So, what happened was this. Maddock Films, which has produced sleeper hits like the Stree franchise and blockbusters like Chava, has an upcoming film called Bhool Chook Maaf. Now, it's a film starring Rajkumar Rao and Vamika Gabbi, and it's about a man who keeps reliving the one day before his marriage again and again in a loop. Now, just a day before its planned theatrical release, Maddock decided to not release the film in theatres.
Anirban, this is actually an unprecedented development in India's media and entertainment industry.
That's my colleague and ET's entertainment ace, Rajesh Naidu.
Let me explain you with the context. This transpired during Operation Sindhur, which was conducted on May 7th. The film Bhool Chook Maaf was supposed to be released on May 9th. The thing is, keeping in mind the national patriotic sentiment, Maddock Films decided against releasing the film in theatre. But PVR said that it was a breach of contract because it suffered loss of programming.
What do you mean by loss of programming?
Loss of programming entails the cost incurred in running shows, which covers rental income to salaries and other fixed cost.
Right. So basically, PVR would face losses because the film wouldn't run.
Right. Ultimately, both parties agreed on an out-of-court settlement in which it was decided that Maddock would release the film on May 23rd, but this time the things were different. It will run in theatres for a very short duration, for 2 weeks, instead of the industry norm of 8 weeks. And post that, the film will get released on an OTT platform.
While this conflict was really short-lived, it does raise several questions. While Maddock cited a war as the basis of its decision, will production companies now try to bypass theatres more and more, abruptly, perhaps for other reasons, maybe in anticipation that their film will not do well in theatres? Will the window of theatrical shows reduce, just like it did in case of Bhool Chook Maaf? And given that films are now being pre-sold for hundreds of crores to OTT platforms already, will the importance of cinemas as exhibition platforms and revenue generators reduce more and more? We try and answer all these and more questions in today's episode. It's Friday, the 23rd of May. I'm your host, Anirban Chowdhury. This is The Morning Brief. So let's start with what are the legal contours of this case? That's the question Rajesh asked media and entertainment lawyer Anushree Rauta.
This is an unprecedented case in that sense, and quite an interesting one, because typically, these things get resolved between parties, and which eventually has happened. So I'll take a step back and start from how this entire legal framework works. Now, typically between exhibitors and producers / distributors, there is an arrangement which happens for every film, the exhibition contract, right? And the exhibition contract has certain clauses which lay out as to what will be the commercial terms of the exhibition. There is something which we call as a holdback period, which is the window between a theatrical release and a digital release. Now, this window is very important because if this window is not there, then you would have movies coming on your mobile phones and on your screens the very next day, right? Which would completely do away with the theatrical market. So there were disputes like way back in 2013 and even before that between Multiplex Association of India and the producer associations like the Producer Guild. And the outcome of those disputes was like an in principle an industry standard which was set. which for Hindi films right now for subscription video on demand platforms is 56 days. So so typically for Hindi films, there's a 56-day gap between the theatrical release and a subscription video on demand release. There's a shorter window when it comes to a pay-per-view or a transactional video on demand, which is typically of 42 days. For regional languages, the duration is different. It's not governed by the same principles as it happens for the Hindi market. Even for this film, Bhool Chuk Maaf, again, there was a similar agreement between PVR and Madoc, which happens for all the other films as well. A pretty standard holdback period of 8 weeks. I think the timing of the release of the film clashed with the situation which happened around the war between the countries. And maybe the producers took a call at that time that it may not have been an ideal time to release the film. Though the theaters were functioning, there was no government directive. There was unlike the time when we saw during COVID, when everything was shut, that was not the case which happened. And I think that's what prompted PVR to approach the court since Madoc announced that they would be going directly to OTT release without going through the theatrical release.
So, Anushree, let's get to the core of the issue. What are the future implications of this? One section of the industry believes that exhibitors are acting like a mafia and producers have very little say despite the fact that they are the makers of the film.
So, Rajesh, a producer very much has the right to directly go to digital and release the film digitally, where the producers don't opt for theatrical release. They do a deal directly with the platforms, and those films go either on Netflix, Amazon, JioStar, or any of these platforms. And we've seen such examples even for Sitare Zameen Par, for instance, now Amir Khan Productions has decided that they will go on after the theatrical, they'll go on YouTube instead of going to another OTT platform. But those decisions are taken well in advance. It is once you have signed a contract, right? There has to be some sanctity to the paperwork which is done. Otherwise, there is no meaning of entering into contracts. But yeah, this brings issues into like the concerns of the producers are also there in terms of because theatrical exhibition these days it's completely unpredictable in terms of what the revenues would be, and maybe that the fear of the films not doing as well as one would anticipate may be the cause of certain decisions being taken. But having said that, I mean, contract is sacrosanct, and I think that it needs to be, the sanctity needs to be taken into account and consideration.
Also, Anushree, what's your take on the fact that Bhool Chuk Maaf will run in theatres for just 2 weeks as opposed to the industry norm of 8 weeks? Don't you think it's a deviation from the norm?
This was basis the mutual settlement, the terms of which I believe are confidential and have not been disclosed publicly as far as the Bombay High Court website is concerned. This has to be basis the mutual settlement which has been arrived between the parties. And you're absolutely right. The general window is of 56 days, but here because there was a dispute and ultimately it's a contract which is entered into between the two parties, right? So they have contractually apparently decided that it will be a shorter holdback period.
Right, right.
And
Do you think?
just to add to that, see in the
Sure.
south also, right? For instance, like here we are talking about 56 days, but you would have seen movies of the south come in a shorter duration on OTT. So there, like the same rules are not prevalent. You may have it on 28 days, sometimes even 21 days from the theatrical
Hmm.
release. So these
Right.
are all industry practices and all contractually driven.
So, what do cinema owners actually feel about this issue and its long standing impact on their business? To understand this, Rajesh spoke to Amit Sharma, Managing Director Entertainment at Miraj Group, one of India's leading multiplex operators.
Of course, it is not a happy situation to be in. I mean, honestly speaking, बहुत पैसे लगते हैं cinema बनाने में, and the expenses to run a cinemas are also very very high. And when you look at specifically from the case of Buljuk Maaf, अगर आप देखोगे तो इस महीने एक हिंदी फिल्म आती है रेड विच वाज ऑन 1st of May, और उसके बाद से आप अगर देखोगे तो देयर इज नो हिंदी फिल्म. ऑफ कोर्स देयर इज एम आई वर्किंग, देयर इज द अदर इंग्लिश फिल्म विच इज फाइनल डेस्टिनेशन
Final
वर्किंग.
decision.
या बट एट द सेम टाइम व्हेन यू लुक एट वेदर इट वो 9 मई को आती है या फिर 23rd मई को अब आ रही है, वे में अगर आप देखोगे तो देयर इज ओनली 2 हिंदी फिल्म्स इन होल मंथ. और उसमें
Hmm.
भी अगर कोई फिल्म चले जाती, वो आपके पास थिएटर में नहीं आती, तो इट रियली रियली बिग सेटबैक फॉर द एग्जिबिटर्स, बिकॉज एंड ऑफ द डे when it comes to Miraj cinemas, the Bollywood or the Hindi film is, contributes anything around 60-65% of our total top line, right? So if you do not have a film coming in, भले वो film 10 crore का business करे, 50 crore का करे, 100 crore का करे, nobody knows, right? But the point is कि जब फिल्म आती है तो आपको एक आस रहती है उस पर्टिकुलर फ्राइडे को. बट अगर फिल्म नहीं आती है तो then you do not have any other option but to shut down your screens.
Also, theaters have fixed costs, which is almost 37 to 40% of their total expenses. That also
Exactly.
one.
या आपको रेंट तो पूरे महीने का देना है.
Correct.
ऐसा तो नहीं है कि फिल्म नहीं आएगी तो आपको रेंट नहीं देना है. आपको सैलरी पूरे महीने की देनी है. आपको योर हाउसकीपिंग एक्सपेंसेस, योर सिक्योरिटी एक्सपेंसेस, योर इलेक्ट्रिसिटी एक्सपेंसेस, एवरीथिंग इज फिक्स, राइट, इन नेचर. सो it's a very capital intensive and a very opex heavy business both the way. So you need the continuous amount of feeding in cinema, and the film needs to come to cinema. That's the point. The good point is that when you look at now, even Kamal sir has already announced now Thugs will be releasing in multiplexes with a 8 weeks window. So one of the big Tamil film, after 35 years, like, Kamal sir and Mani Ratnam coming together. So
Right.
that's the positive. When you look at Amir sir has already said that, he doesn't want to go to OTT route for Sitare Zameen Par. Okay. So these are the kind of, like, people who are supporting the industry now, because we need to bring more and more movies into cinemas, and we need to have a
Right.
bigger window so that we can celebrate the cinema once again.
Right. Right. But do you think, I mean, after their whole negotiation with each other, there is a very limited window, right? 2 week window. After that, Bhool Chuk Maaf would directly go on Amazon. But do you think it's a small period? They could have at least given like more time, 4 week or 6 weeks in theater?
As far as I know, this is on the direction and the suggestion of the Honorable High Court Judge. The call has been taken, but I think it's one of those kind of film out of a million, जहाँ पर ये exception है. Otherwise, we are sticking to 8 week window, and we are very clear about it.
Right, right. Do you think that there is this, a certain amount of nervousness and uncertainty among producers to release films in theater at present?
Rajesh, आज ऐसा नहीं है कि today, people are nervous about, like, the film. See, fortunately or unfortunately, we belong to a kind of industry जहाँ पर every Friday को क्या चलेगा कि नहीं चलेगा, nobody knows. I mean, and this is not happening for the first time. This is happening for last 100 years of the cinema industry. Because no one can tell you that this is the right formula and this is a pakka formula. Go and, like, release the film and it will work. I think, like, here, the 3-4 very, very important point. The content maker, which is talent to producer to the director, they need to work on a particular film with integrity, full integrity, not making a project. The point what I see now post pandemic is somewhere the marketing of a movie has taken a backseat. So वो कहीं ना कहीं जो है वो मुझे लगता है कि वो सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है. आपको एक्टर को जाके सिटी टूर करने पड़ेंगे, वो जाके उनको पब्लिक से मिलना पड़ेगा. दे नीड टू बी सीन इन द पब्लिक, and it is just releasing your trailer on YouTube and, like, buying some view will not work. Similar way में जो cinema exhibitors हैं, they also need to, like, start considering movies as their own product, and they also need to, like, go out of the way to market that particular film.
Right,
It's
right,
because आपको वो करना पड़ेगा, आपको पूरी इंडस्ट्री को साथ में मिलके करना पड़ेगा. And
right,
cinema exhibitor also need to, like, make some nice good looking cinemas, but at the same time very hygienic, so that the people who basically comes to celebrate movie at cinemas, they should get a very good experience. So
right.
I think this is what needs to be done.
So, like I asked in the beginning of the episode, will there be a fundamental shift in the way films are sold in India? To understand these tectonic shifts, I spoke to Rajesh again. Hey Rajesh, welcome back.
Hi, Anirban.
So, see, you spoke to a lawyer, you spoke to a cinema person. Now, let's come to what this really entails for the industry and what lies ahead. First of all, what are the dynamics between theatre and other forms of exhibition? How do they compare? What are the comparative valuations? Does one depend on the other? Does one flow from the other? Give me a brief explanation of that.
Time and again for media and entertainment industry, there have been lifelines. it started with satellite, then came OTTs. The importance of streamers actually went up post pandemic. One of the key things which worked in their favor were underperformance or poor performance of Hindi films. So, because of that, the industry suffered a huge funding crunch. And this funding gap was sufficiently fulfilled or met by OTTs. Now, in this context, what has happened is there is this interdependence between OTTs and theaters. So, a film, if it does well in theaters, it has to garner better valuation or higher price from streamers. It's not the other way around. Over the years, streamers and producers, they have agreed upon three things. One is OTTs, they gave or rather paid huge prices for films which they bought during pandemic because they wanted to increase their library. But some films, or rather a large number of films, didn't receive good response from their subscribers and also from large public opinion. So then the better sense prevailed and they also cut corners, and then they went on a very pruning phase where they looked at the project from the point of view of cost. Consequently, they figured out three things. One is spending on marketing on films in a very careful manner. Second, deciding on the price of a film based on a slab format. And third is going for big budget or big star of films. As a result, a film's performance in theater would determine its price paid by OTT.
Rajesh, can you give me an example of a film that did really well in the theater and so commanded a brilliant price on an OTT platform as well?
Sure. It was Pushpa 2 The Rule. The film garnered close to 1460 crore in India.
Wow.
And Netflix paid 275 crore for the film.
Got it. No, but tell me, what an OTT platform paid Pushpa, the makers of Pushpa, comes to about 19% of what it garnered in theaters. Is that the calculation? And is that all it earns on an OTT platform, or will it earn more? I mean, something incremental to the 270 or 275 odd crore that they're paying it.
In such case, there are other aspects involved. If a film is a multilingual film, we have seen instances where a Telugu version of that film is bought by one OTT and Hindi version bought by another OTT. So a multilingual film can make money on different languages, or it can bundle all these film in all languages and make one straight deal with an OTT platform. Mm-hmm. So this is very dynamic in nature. One can't say, what exactly transpires. It depends on what the producer of a film and the OTT decide.
Also, films are being pre-sold for very high valuations, right? Give me examples of those.
Correct. That's a big thing because post-pandemic, the Hindi film industry has been going through a big fund crunch. OTTs, to a great extent, have emerged as a savior. So usually what happens is big production houses which have a known track record in terms of well-performing films, they put up funds by pre-selling their digital rights to streamers. In lieu of that, they get the initial funding required to start the film's production. This happens with most big budget films. It's not just with Chhawa, Pushpa 2, Pathan. Most big budget films, they start with pre-sale of digital rights. One of the most awaited films of Sanjay Leela Bhansali, Love and War, which is supposed to get released next year, the film has been pre-sold to Netflix for 130 crore.
Understood. Rajesh, tell me, this increasingly seems to me like a reduction in the importance of theatre as a platform for exhibition and as a revenue garner. Is the importance of theatres reducing?
That's not the case, because a film's lifetime collections, a large part would always be theatrical revenues. And it's like an OTT valuation is like a dessert, but the main course will always be theatrical revenues.
Understood. Understood. Now, Rajesh, let's talk about the competition in the digital space itself. Both your guests mentioned Amir Khan's upcoming film, which is Sitari Zameen Par, which, after its theatrical run, will be released on YouTube on a pay-per-view basis. How do you read this, and how does this space look to you in the next 1 or 2 years?
I think it's a very bold move from Amir Khan because it's going to change the entire dynamics of the streaming industry. YouTube has over 2.5 billion monthly active users. In India alone, YouTube has 46.2 crore users. Netflix and Amazon Prime globally have users in the range of 20 to 30 crore. Now, one has to keep in mind what exactly are the nuances of the deal between YouTube and Amir Khan production. If Amir Khan goes for pay per view, again, it's a very interesting model because this model has worked in the West. He is actually in a very advantageous position in both situations. If we take into account pay per view and advertising view or video on advertising mode. In pay per view, a production house or a producer gets 80% of the revenues of the price a viewer pays. And in advertising model, at least 60% of the revenues go to producers. So the scope for revenues is humongous. I think it's a very disruptive move in the sense that it will change the whole dynamics and put producers at the center of things. It's going to be a win-win thing and bring in more balance in the industry and more equilibrium in the industry.
So, what we are witnessing is a fundamental rewiring of the business of cinema. The old model, sell the film to a distributor, pray for box office returns, rinse, repeat, is giving way to data-driven deals, algorithmic audiences, and platforms that work as both theatre and ticket counter. Streaming giants like Netflix, Prime Video, and now YouTube are not just disrupting distribution and exhibition, they are actually reprogramming the DNA of storytelling, financing, and even what defines a hit. For producers, this new exhibition economy offers more control. But there are pitfalls, like the ones we discussed in this episode, that they need to avoid. After all, no one wants a trust deficit in an industry that runs largely on relationships. And for theatres, it's a reckoning. In an age where films are sold on demand directly to the user, the bigger questions are who's actually selling the film and who's buying it. And those are questions we will leave you with today. You were listening to this episode on The Morning Brief. It was produced by me and Vinay Joshi, sound designed by Rajas Naik. A new episode of The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. Keep listening. The external clip used in this episode belongs to its owner. Credits are mentioned in the description.